And I also do closed captioning, David, so there'll be a written record of this whole thing, if you would like it. So, good afternoon, everyone. We are really excited to have David Cobb with us this afternoon. And I think many of you who are on the call know who he is. And he is part of Cooperation Humboldt. And they are working on the Eco Village, cooperatives, maybe cooperative housing. And he was just talking about a conference they're going to be doing in April in Humboldt, which he will talk more about. But I want to welcome you, David, and I want to start off with a question before we go into opening it up to everybody else. So my first question was going back in the past a little bit, because we heard so much about stop the steal with a legitimate election, that there actually was a steal 20 some years ago, or actually not 20, but back in 2004, when John Kerry was elected president, but didn't actually assume the office. So one of the things I wanted you to talk about, David, because you went to Ohio to literally find out what happened in the the recount process. You were able to start part of the recount. So I'd like you to just kind of briefly tell us what happened in Ohio. What do you think you proved there? And what could we learn from that going forward, especially going into the next 2 election cycles?
Well, thank you, Georgia. One thing I will say is I can't say with certainty that the 2004 election was stolen. What I can say with certainty is that we can't be certain who actually won that election. So I think it's important that we have the facts tell the story. And here are the facts. Remember, folks, I was the Green Party nominee for president in 2004. As such, on the election eve, reports flooded in to our campaign, to the Kerry campaign, to election officials. I mean, it was an open secret that there had been really a meltdown of whatever the process was. Why? Because there had been a whole host and series of glitches and problems and just horrific problems that told a very disturbing story, or at least intimated a disturbing story. One of the things that we do know, for example, is that in many places, the election results did not match the exit surveys. But wait, there's more. We also know that in many places that there were more people recording votes than were supposed to have actually voted. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I could literally spend the next 90 minutes giving you a horrific example of problem, glitch, concern, and they were all powerful. And one thing that we know after the fact is that there was a huge, frankly, fight in the Kerry Edwards campaign. John Edwards at the time wanted to fight and hire and initiate a recount. John Kerry, convinced by his brother not to do so, they decided to stand down. So John Kerry did not fight to investigate Ohio. He did not file recounts. He did not fight to secure the election that he may well have won. I will argue that that's because for John Kerry, it was more important to stay a member in good standing of the neoliberal ruling elite than it was to actually secure the integrity of the election. So I did, in fact, file a recount, not only in Ohio, but New Mexico, Nevada. There were, again, reports of horrific problems. It did culminate in an attempted recount, but we never actually got a true recount. What we were able to do, though, was to get some very partial beginnings of a recount. The courts shut us down. Why? Because they said, I, David Cobb, Green Party nominee, did not have a reasonable chance to win the presidency, even if the recounts in those states were to go forward and I would win those electoral college votes. And literally the judges in those states said, if John Kerry had filed the recounts would go forward. So that was really heart-wrenching, especially when we can tell you with certainty There's a great book that came out. We did do a series of hearings for Congress that then Representative John Conyers, may the goddess rest his soul, a great champion for peace and justice in this country. Then, of course, a congressional representative held hearings, and he put out a book called What Went Wrong in Ohio. It is literally a book that details, again, an entire series of profound problems associated with that election. Not the least of which was, remember that in 2000, what we had was the debacle of Florida. And by the way, we do know that that Al Gore did in fact beat George Bush in Florida, right? And I think that this is really important, and I can say that with confidence, Georgia, because the New York Times, actually using Freedom of Information Act, actually got a hold of the entire state of Florida and recounted the entire state. And Al Gore won. Problem? Al Gore only selectively demanded recounts in certain counties based on his belief about where he was likely to do well. And of course, we know that the US Supreme Court literally stopped the process with the famous or infamous Bush versus Gore decision. But one of the things that 2000 showed us was the problem of the direct recording devices, or so-called black box voting. And in 2004, there were a host of problems with them. And one thing that I'm very proud of is, because of standing up for that recount and attempting the process and shining at least some level of light and inquiry into the process, we were able to basically stop the use of black box voting, which had been proliferating all across the country since 2000. Literally, we stopped it in its tracks. They are being phased out everywhere. I think they may, in fact, already be phased out. And I can also tell you, in California, then Secretary of State Deborah Bowen did a top to bottom review, citing the Cobb Green Party recount, demonstrating problems. And California was the first state to actually outlaw the use of black box voting and DRE recording equipment. So, Georgia, that whole process, I think, is important because it shows the importance of fighting for true election integrity, and not just to secure, to install the person that you want to win, but to actually use recounts, to use audits, to use good science and good public policy to ensure that whoever actually won the most damn votes actually takes office. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, is, and frankly, a huge distinction between the completely baseless, fabricated big lie that the Trump administration is perpetuating, and shamefully Republican Party administrators are going along with.
Yeah, now you just mentioned, I don't want to spend all the time on this, but I think this is very important for people to know, because there's nowhere else we're going to get this information. You're one of the experts on what happened in these two elections, having been there. And you just had told me before we began today that some of the people in Ohio, I think it was, ended up in prison over some of this.
Well, not prison, but they did go to county jail. They went to jail in Cuyahoga County. Several election administrators actually went to jail because through the course of our attempted recount, we exposed a level of, whether you're going to call it gross negligence or fraudulent behavior is a matter of motive. But what we can say is literally, clearly proven in criminal court that election administrators violated Ohio election law. And in fact, again, if you do the research, what you'll find is literally several election administrators went to jail. So that's why I think it's important, and I'm going to say it again, I don't know who won the election presidential election in 2004. And frankly, nobody can be absolutely confident because of what went wrong in Ohio, and we never got a true recount of that process. I can tell you, as much as it pains me that in 2016, I can tell you with confidence, Donald Trump won the election. Why? Because Jill Stein engaged in recounts in Michigan and in Wisconsin. And the recounts sadly demonstrated that, in fact, Donald Trump won that election. So I think it's important that we recognize the importance of recounts, the importance of audits that are based on the best science and the best practices. And we did not see that in 2020. In fact, to the contrary, what we saw were baseless lies told by Donald Trump about that election cycle.
Yes, well, I think this is very important information as we go toward next year and 2024. And it's something I would like to bring you back when we're going into the next election cycles, because I do think you have much more information about it and much more experience with dealing with how the elections are run and not run properly.
So I'll tell you what, I will come back, but I will bring with me the true election integrity experts, the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. I'll bring to you folks from Common Cause. I'll bring to you a host of folks that are actually much more skilled than I, because I do think I've got a skill set, but I don't want to claim that I am the cutting edge of election integrity work. I will use this way to say, I do think I'm an expert at creating solidarity economics in a very concrete way to to shift away from the power over dominator economic system that we're currently suffering under and towards a truly regenerative economic system.
Great. Yeah. Well, that sounds like what we'll do as a panel. Then from what you're talking about, bringing those people together, we'll do a panel on election integrity. So now let's move to what you're actually doing now in Humboldt, because I think this is very interesting. Why don't you tell us something about what Cooperation Humboldt is and what its plans are?
You bet. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen. Oh, no, I can't.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can share with you.
Yes. So what y'all, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to tell you about Cooperation Humboldt, and here's the teaser. And David Corton and hello, Fran, as public speakers know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tease you with what I'm going to say. Right. So first thing I'm going to do is walk you through what Cooperation Humboldt is. Then I'm going to walk you through really a transformational, cutting edge new tool to actually implement a truly new indigenous-led way of doing economics. So I'm going to now share my screen and take you to, not that one, but that one. You should be seeing Cooperation Humboldt. That is our main website. If you click new here, so go to cooperationhumboldt.com for anybody who's interested, and you'll walk through very quickly the welcome page. Cooperation Humboldt exists to create a solidarity economy here in our region. We believe that it's possible to not only survive, but to thrive, to live rich and meaningful lives without exploiting or oppressing anyone, without allowing anyone to exploit or oppress us, and that it can be done in not only a sustainable way, but a truly regenerative way. And if you take a look, friends, the puzzle that you're looking at is objective reality of existing heteropatriarchy, imperialism or subtle colonialism, an economic system known as capitalism, and a worldview of white supremacy, a power over dominator system of how to organize the entire political economy. And we are committed to moving towards a decolonized lens, one that is inclusive with true gender equity, that is explicitly anti-racist, and that is based on the principles of the solidarity economy. One thing I want to point out is that we say up front, it's not just about participation, y'all, because neo-Confederates can have participatory processes. So we are clear about what we believe at Cooperation Humboldt. We believe our current institutions are fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive, that it's a result of social, political, and economic system that incentivize, don't just allow, but literally encourage and incentivize domination and exploitation. That capitalism is an economic system that's based on that exploitation and oppression, and that political and economic system is going to destroy the planet if we do not shift to one that is cooperative and sustainable. We believe it's possible to create completely new institutions that incentivize cooperation, love, compassion, and kindness. And I want to say, I think that all of us need to start talking about love and compassion and kindness in political discourse. We believe we should lift up and support groups doing grassroots work with working class people and people of color. And lastly, for those of you who are looking at the screen, we believe we can work with you or your organization, even if you don't believe these things. But we're going to be clear about who we are and what we believe. And I'm going to tell you a quick anecdote to prove to you what that looks like. Because in 2020, I could have taken you to a front yard here in Eureka, California. That yard had been converted to an organic garden with fruits and vegetables and also local flowers and grasses to attract pollinators. There was a big sign that said Cooperation Humboldt. We believe access to culturally appropriate food is a fundamental human right. It should not be a commodity bought and paid for. Everyone should have access for it. Therefore, we make a pledge that the bounty of this garden will be shared without cost. That was in somebody's yard, right? Georgia, remember it's 2020. Can you guess what sign was right next to it when I say that we'll work with anyone?
Not sure.
Donald Trump for president.
What?
So I'm just telling you that we will work with anybody regardless of their position and ideology. Having said that, the people in that house, although we worked with them to create that garden, will never become leaders at Cooperation Humboldt unless they have an epiphany, a worldview, a transformation, a Saul on the road to Damascus to become Paul kind of experience. Why? Because although we'll work with anyone, we often say, you must be this tall to ride the ride of leadership at Cooperation Humboldt. So that approach that we take, we find is actually assisting people to get in where they fit in. The next thing that I want to say about Cooperation Humboldt is we have real clarity as a theory of change. We have to resist all oppression and exploitation wherever it happens. We have to build completely new systems to meet our needs. We have to empower ourselves and others by learning the skills to succeed. And we have to inspire others to believe that it's possible to actually create a new world. At Cooperation Humboldt, we often say that theory without action is mere contemplation, but action without theory is just doing stuff. So you might make transformational change without a theory, but it'll be by accident. And at Cooperation Humboldt, we are intentionally developing a shared theory through a process of study groups. And if you are interested in imagining creating a version of Cooperation Humboldt wherever you are, I'll make sure to send out to Georgia that can send to everyone who's interested to come to a training for trainers that we're doing with our colleagues at Cooperation Jackson. And you'll see that there is a deeper dive on the theory of change that I'm not going to go into now because I'm giving you the big picture. The solidarity economy is defined. Remember that capitalism can equally be defined. And it's very simple. I'll do it quickly. But it is 5 characteristics. 1, the private ownership of the means of production. Number 2, that goods and services are produced as commodities rather than for immediate human need or use. So commodity production. 3, that those commodities are produced to make a profit. And that profit maximization is the reason that you do economics. 4, that labor itself is just one more commodity to be bought and paid for on the market. And 5, the market allocation. And friends, that definition that I just gave you, I promise you, you go to any introduction to macroeconomics anywhere, and you'll find that is the basic definition. The problem is, if you think about the implications of that, it is the creation of the ideology of the cancer cell. And I want to give a hat tip to David Corton. The first time I I saw that really done poetically was in his seminal book, When Corporations Rule the World, where he talked about the cowboy mentality on a spaceship. That's literally what capitalism is doing, this idea of unlimited growth forever. And instead, we're actually on a finite system. So capitalism left uninterrupted is literally going to destroy the planet. A solidarity economy is different because it's based on the principle of, first of all, pluralism. It's not a fixed blueprint. It's not a dogmatic, this is the only answer. It acknowledges that there are multiple paths to the same goal of a just and sustainable world. But the second principle is solidarity, and that is grounded in a collective practice of mutualism, cooperation, reciprocity, love, caring. The third principle, equity across all dimensions: racial, ethnic, religious, sexual orientation, cultural. Fourth, a commitment to sustainability, that is genuine regenerative harmony of nature itself. And lastly, a commitment to participatory processes. The understanding that if a decision affects your life, you ought to get an opportunity to help make it. And friends, I do want to remind us that the word economy comes from Greek, and it just means the management of home. So the problem is, in our current economic thinking, we are actually not doing economics properly or correctly. Indigenous people, and I'm not just romanticizing, I'm saying, like, my ancestors were once indigenous. So were yours. Like, if we go back far enough, we were all once indigenous. But the indigenous worldview of management, the household of the home, is all of nature itself, and that we are in proper balance, and therefore we maintain abundance. We keep our appropriate role in that system. So I just want to point out that if we really understand, we're not just managing resources. The indigenous worldview is to be in right relationship with life itself. And that's why it's so important that we keep that centered. So what is it that we do at Cooperation Humboldt? Well, all of our programs and projects are developed around program areas. Each program area has a foundational belief, and each program area then houses specific projects. I'm going to run through these quickly because I think it's important to just give you a breadth of what we do. Our first program area is arts and culture, because we know that art and culture is not an add-on. It's literally a human need. And the seminal thing that we do there is an annual Artist Dismantling Capitalism. But we also have an entire series of other projects that we do, an artist hub, an Imaginal Services Bureau. Again, go to our website. You can click on any of those links and see them. But wait, there's more. We have a care and wellness team premised on the fundamental belief that access to health, wellness, and care are fundamental human rights. And the way that that mostly turns up now is incubating community health worker groups as worker-owned cooperatives with the new Rising Hmong Association, Comunidad Unida del Norte Arcata, and a street outreach for houseless people, for people who have no shelter. By the way, because of the relationships and the trust that we built in this community, that street outreach is actually a $400,000 fee-for-service contract that we have with the County of Humboldt using federal CARES Act money, because we have demonstrated using empathetic interviews and human-centered design that we actually know what we're doing with assisting the houseless people. And when we applied for the contract, we made it a point to say the first 6 months we'll do the things that the federal grant is requiring for distributing rain gear and food and tents and other needs. But within 6 months, we will have identified other houseless people to put on payroll and teach them how to be ombudspersons and be community health workers for their own community. But wait, there's still more, because we have an economic democracy program area where we work on public banking, participatory budgeting, and worker-owned Humboldt that actually incubates worker-owned collectives, cooperative businesses, and we're the first incubator in the state of California to have a contract with our local small business development center to actually be paid as consultants. Because of course, as David Corton can tell you, worker-owned cooperative businesses are still businesses. So this is another example of very concrete application that puts us in a position to not just imagine this world, but to create it. The last that I'll cover very quickly are education, because we believe that everyone has a right to an education and that everybody is a teacher, everybody is a learner. Collective education and collective learning is critical to our success. The biggest thing that we do there are study groups, which are small group discussion series, 12-week series to go deep diving on the things that like what is capitalism, what is the solidarity economy, but also how do you actually do these things. We also, of course, do public workshops and forums like this one. And we also house under education the WIOT honor tax, which is a Cooperation Humboldt pays 1% of our entire budget every year to the WIOT tribe, not as a donation, but as a self-imposed tax to recognize that I exist and Cooperation Humboldt is on unceded WIOT territory. I am an uninvited guest here. And so we pay that tax in order to acknowledge that sovereignty. The last two projects that I'm going to talk about very quickly, food, because we believe that access to nutritious, culturally appropriate food is a fundamental human right. We do mini gardens, we do those community gardens, we have little free pantries all across our community, much like the little free libraries that you may be familiar with, only we have about 35 to 40 of those all across our community, where ordinary people are putting non-perishable dry goods and other projects and sharing it. And there's no questions asked. People give and take from them as they see fit. We've also planted over 200 fruit trees in public community spaces. They're not yet giving fruit, but we expect within 2 years, because we started this several years ago, within several years, the first fruit will actually come out. We have Jardín Santiago, which is a community garden collaboration with a local group of Latinx folks, and many of whom who are not undocumented, called Centro del Pueblo, and we operate that collectively together. And then lastly, housing. We believe that access to safe, secure, affordable housing is a fundamental human right. And in order to do that, we are incubating the development of eco-villages, housing cooperatives, and this is the thing where I'm going to shift gears, the development of a first of its kind, indigenous-led community land trust. It's called Dishkama Humboldt. I want to give a hat tip because you can read about Dishkama Humboldt in the next issue of Yes Magazine, the Journal of Positive Futures. And I want to acknowledge that there's been a transition, right? But the reality is, you know, Dave and Fran and Corton were the visionaries who created that publication, and I'm so honored, and it just fills me with joy to be able to share with David and Fran that we'll be in Yes Magazine for this next stage that I'm about to tell you about, Dishkama Humboldt. First of all, folks, Dishkama means love in Salatluk, which is the language of the WIOT people. Dishkama Humboldt, and we named it that because we are all here and we all love this place. And I think that what I want to really underscore is that this is something, and I say this with humility, but sincerity. Nobody's done exactly what we're doing with Dishkama. And I can say that with confidence because I have approached and gotten assistance from the Sustainable Economies Law Center and UCLA Indigenous Law Center and the Just Lawyering Institute and Movement General Counsel. Because as a lawyer, I was a trial lawyer, I wasn't a transactional lawyer, but I can tell you all good lawyers know a big part of good lawyering is good, appropriate plagiarism, right? Like you figure out what other people have done and you just replicate it. or you figure out a good argument and you make it when it's appropriate. But here's the point. Nobody's done what I'm about to tell you. They've done pieces of it. But our unique approach is to create a community land trust. Now, community land trusts already exist, of course, and yay that. Most land trusts, however, are designed to conserve existing farmland, ranch land, or forest. Yay that. A small percentage of them are used for affordable housing. Yay that. There is a new development called a permanent real estate cooperative that is an effort to do affordable housing and community land trust together. And I want to give a hat tip to our friends at the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, which is really at the cutting edge of that. They're also doing it at Boston Ujima project. So again, there are examples of that. But we're doing something even deeper and I think even more visionary, because we've said we want to create a community land trust, and we're creating it now. But that land trust is not just going to be a nonprofit under existing 501c3 laws. That land trust is going to exist under tribal law. And we're working with the tribal government and the Wiyot tribe to create an entirely new nonprofit series of ordinances and laws that will facilitate this. Why is that important? Because we're going to maintain the sacredness of the Wiyot people and the relationship that they have to this place, the knowledge of how to properly care for this place. And we're going to create this legal mechanism called Dishgama. And get this, y'all, there is going to be a nonprofit, but again, under Indian law, right? And get this, 7 members of that board of directors, the Wiyot tribal government has voted unanimously to accept the power and responsibility to designate in perpetuity 4 members of that board, right? So you see, for those of you who know about 501c3s and nonprofits, typically what you do is you create one, right? And then it's a self-perpetuating board, or maybe you try to figure out some kind of way to democratize it a little bit. But I've just told you something different. I've said of a 7-member board, the Wiyot tribe and the government has in perpetuity the majority shares of who is going to be designated. But wait, there's even more, because Cooperation Humboldt will have 1 member of that board in perpetuity. Get this, David, I think you'll be appreciative of this. Full Spectrum Capital Partners, which are a group of impact investors ponying up money to be able to do this kind of regenerative economic work, they have agreed that they will have 1. And we are in conversation with our local community development financial institution, and they're going through an internal process. We're inviting them to have 1. So you see my point? It is in perpetuity an organizational commitment to this process of this land trust, 4 to 1 to 1 to 1. So when I say it's Wiyot led, y'all, I mean it is Wiyot led in perpetuity because the Wiyot tribe, and as Ted Hernandez, the tribal chair, has taught me to say, the Wiyot have not merely been here for the last 10,000 years. Ted has taught me to say, and I will tip my hat to Ted, the Wiyot have been here since time immemorial. And the Wiyot tribe know how to be in right relationship to this place. And as Taj James often says, we have to learn to follow the people who know the way. And the Wiyot people know the way. And wherever you are, there are people in your community. They may not be known to you, but I promise you there are people who know the way. So that Dishgama Community Land Trust is a new legal instrument. And what I'm going to do now is share my screen again and just walk you through what that actually looks like for us.
And David,
yes.
Can you write Wiyot in the chat box? I'm not sure.
I sure can. Let me do that right now before I do this.
Great, because I'm not sure how we spell that.
Yes, no, that's quite all right.
And the closed captioning is not getting it.
Wiyot. And what I'm going to do now is share my screen again and just walk you through what this actually looks like And let me make sure to go here and do this and share screen.
Yeah, it should be still shared with you. Yes, okay.
Okay, so, oh, not that. Let me close that, and that. And are you looking at the entire screen where you can see it?
Well, we were now, okay, now we are Dishkamu Humboldt.
Dishkama, yes. And it's restoring balance and abundance to, oh, here, let me present so you should be able to see it easier. Restoring balance and abundance to Wiyot ancestral territory, because I often say, my friends, that although I am an uninvited guest on Wiyot territory, my mama and papa taught me when you're a guest, you should act appropriately. And what I have learned is, and I say this with sincerity and humility, my society and culture has not really taught me how to be an appropriate guest. I have been taught and trained power over, domination, commodification of the natural world. And I need to remember what my ancestors of Celtic origin once knew before they were driven off the land by the Romans, or before that by the English Empire, which is how to be in right relationship to a place. So we ought to know how to be in right relationship here. And what you're looking at is a photograph of Tuluwat Island, the spiritual and physical center of the universe for the Wiyot tribe. And what is worth knowing is that Tuluwat is the first time that a city government ever returned without restrictions land to indigenous people without litigation. It was a result of a political, cultural process of decades. So our vision at Dishkama is to engage in regenerative economic development across sectors, communities, and jurisdictions to build power, heal trauma, and increase resilience. Please notice that this makes a heart because we love Humboldt. We have economic development, we have affordable housing, we have ecological restoration. Those are the priorities of Dishkama. And please notice the diamonds. The Wiyot tribe is at the center, cooperate with 4 diamonds representing their majority stakeholder. We have Cooperation Humboldt with 1, our capital partners with another, and then a final community partner. So we are imagining bringing truly integrated capital into the process to do restoration work. And what I know is this: I am anti-capitalism as an economic system. I am most assuredly not anti-capital. We need capital in order to do the work that we want to do. What we know is that this region was once in balance. The Wiyot people have lived here since time immemorial. Until the 1850s, they had stewarded over 40 miles of our coastland, extending inland about 10 miles. The Wiyot people understood the sacred interconnectedness between people and place, but our current modern systems are now out of balance, disrupted with the onset of settler colonialism. It started with the gold rush. It intensified through decades of extractive practices, first around timber, then fishing and water diversion. It has literally left our region to face economic decline, as well as increasing environmental threats, sea level rise and wildfire fires. What you're looking at in the photograph is the lower Eel River near Fortuna that actually went dry in 2014. It was the first time the geologists told us that that had ever happened. And it's a result of mismanagement of the home. We know that this imbalance is systemic and structural based on the social, political, and economic institutions. We are not being good stewards of this land. We are not being good ancestors for our own descendants. Friends, we know that we can heal trauma and restore balance. The Wiyot people understand that human beings have a critical role in keeping our ecosystem in balance. And just as the Wiyot people have returned balance to Tuluwat Island through ecological restoration and a world renewal ceremony, we intend through Dishkama to return the entire region and all of its systems, economic, social, and environmental, to balance. And while this process is Wiyot led and inspired, It includes active participants with all local residents, indigenous and non-indigenous alike. And that, I think, is how we can heal the land, by healing each other. Michelle Vassal often says that we are working at the speed of trust, because the Wiyot tribe and Cooperation Humboldt have many years of working together. We have not only done the honor tax, which I mentioned, and by the way, the Cooperation Humboldt didn't create the honor tax. I want to lift up the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Development, who first began it. But Michelle Vassal will tell you that it was almost exclusively happening in Indian country by other Indians. When Cooperation Humboldt came on the scene, we actually approached the Wiyot tribe to ask, not only could we make, like we wanted to make a tax and impose that tax, but we asked if we could be public and try to help other people to do it. And they said, yes, please do. That would be good, because it's not appropriate for the Wiyot tribe to go to others. And in their words, they said that literally 10, 20 times more people are paying it, not because I think that we're better, but when white people began to go to other white people, it shifted the narrative. And I'm not saying that to pat myself or Cooperation on the head. I'm saying that's what is known as the judicious use of privilege. I know that we have a responsibility to speak up, and we have a responsibility to inspire others to join us. So our impact is to take a regional cross-sectoral approach to regenerative economic development using affordable housing, economic development, and ecological restoration. The affordable housing, we're looking at building between 100 to 150 units over the next 3 years. We're targeting 300 units by 2027. We're almost surely to be using laminated mass timber, which is a cutting edge new technology. Economic development includes workforce training and development in sustainable industries, growing the regenerative economy, probably sustainable forestry. And then ecological restoration, I want to take a moment to say, when Tuluat was returned to the Wiyot tribe, it actually was an EPA hazardous site. That's true. It took a decade, and the Wiyot tribe was the first tribe to receive an environmental site reuse award by Region 9 of the EPA. It may have been the first one in the nation. They literally restored this land, and everyone benefits as a result of it. And I could go into in a deep conversation about what that ecological restoration looked like under Wiyot leadership, but non-Wiyot people were out there as well, and we were working shoulder to shoulder, and we're imagining doing that all across the county. The other thing I want to say is we're going to do this with urban infill housing. You're looking at an architectural rendering of a laminated mass timber mid-rise 4 to 6 stories, a mass timber housing project in partnership with the city of Eureka. And the next one is eco villages, which are low-rise detached and semi-detached dwelling units. Think about intentional communities, if you will. Then we've got a Dishkama Innovation Center, again, a mass timber project with retail and training space on the first floor, and 3 or 4 stories of affordable housing. Then we have green construction workforce training, growing the regenerative economy and increasing prosperity. And we have an invitation to capital stewards to engage with us for both business development, operational efficiency, and capital fundraising. And so we're seeking grants, venture capital, private equity, and debt. And the last thing I want to just walk through, folks, is to give you a flavor for our anchor actors. There's Michelle Vassal, who's the Wiyot Tribal Administrator. For those of you who know about Indigenous, the way the tribes operate, that means Michelle is the functional equivalent of either the CEO, if it was a for-profit, the executive director, if it was a nonprofit, or city manager, if it was a city. I mean, she is literally the chief executive, and she reports to the tribal council, which are elected. Myself, I'm the executive director of Cooperation Humboldt. You see Taj James and Ruben Hernandez of Full Spectrum Capital Partners. And those are our anchor organizations that are actually driving this vision. The tribe, local community organization, and visionary impact investors. But take a look at the collaborating local anchor organizations. The Arcata Economic Development Corporation is the largest CDFI, that stands for Community Development Financial Institution, anywhere in the 4 counties in the far north coast. We've got the Small Business Development Corporation Center of the North Coast, College of the Redwoods, Pacific Builders, one of the largest builders in this community, the County of Humboldt, the City of Eureka, the Redwood Region Economic Development Commission, Humboldt Area Foundation, the North Coast Co-op, Access Humboldt, the Ink People, Del Arte, and lastly, the caliber of the people who are on our local financial integrity team. Alex Izaki McNeil is an investment manager. Danny Kelly is the president of the board of directors of College of the Redwoods and a business consultant with Edge Caliber. Greg Foster is the executive director of the Redwood Region Economic Development Commission. John Bartholomew is the Humboldt County treasurer. Kate Lancaster is an HSU business professor. Kathy Moxon is a retired banker active with California Forward. Kit Mann is the founder of Coca-Tact. Ross Welch is the executive director of the Arcata Development Corporation. Lynn Mayer is the founder of Natural Decadence, one of the largest food production businesses in our community. Lonnie Grafman is an engineering professor at HSU, appropriate technology. And Peter Pennekamp is on the board of directors of Coast Central Credit Union. And this slide is the last one. It is simply a thank you and an invitation to follow up with us.
Great.
Friends, what I've just done is given you Cooperation Humboldt as an organization. Then I've showed you what it can look like to be a visionary and imagine not just doing individual projects, but to transform a place. And I'm going to ask Georgia, when we do the follow-up here, I'm going to send this slide deck.
Great.
I'm going to send the digital copy of what will be in the upcoming issue, the winter issue of Yes Magazine. And I'm going to also invite you, if you are interested in pursuing a training the trainers kind of approach to how to recreate this in your community, we want you to get involved. Because the last thing I want to say, and I'll drop it into the chat, Mary, the last thing that I want to say is, and I say this sincerely, we are doing something that nobody else is doing. And a lot of people, including foundations and others, are excited. We're pitching, we're raising money. And I am not interested in having a competitive advantage so that we get to raise a whole bunch of money and others don't. My pledge to you, my friends, Michelle Vassel's pledge, we are going to teach everyone everywhere to do this. That this has to be something that doesn't just happen off to the side. This can't just be the niche economics. This has to be how we do economics. We have to rethink economics. We have to rethink politics. We have to rethink the world that we live in and return this continent to the balance that existed before settler colonialism came.
Okay, I'm gonna, great. This has been a lot, and it's actually longer than we usually have, but it's been a lot of material. And there are 2 things that come to mind before I go to questions. I'll go to Ben Boyce first. I see his hand up, but before I do, there are 2 things I want to bring up. We have a huge center here called the Sonoma Developmental Center, that the ideas you have would be so appropriate. Right now, most people are very upset with the 3 plans that have been set out for this, which is not just affordable housing, but most would be market rate housing and a hotel, all the stuff we do not need. So I want to talk to you separately about that. And some people from Sonoma County may also want to do that. The other thing I wanted to just bring out, because you kind of glossed over it really quickly, how important this is to organizing. You mentioned that the people who had the garden in front of their house had the Trump sign, and you said, we'll work with anybody, but there's a limit to what kind of leadership is available. You have qualifications for that leadership. And this is what will set you apart from organizations that can be taken over by agent provocateurs. And so that hit me right away, because I thought this is a critical piece here. It's what exactly what the Mondragon Cooperative say. We have open admission. However, no one can come in and take this over. It's one person, one share. No one can come in and be a leader without having invested and be part of the community. So they understand that open admission doesn't mean we're open to be taken over. And I think that is a critical piece in creating something like you're creating. And if we're going to learn from you, we need to know that the leadership has to be an integral part of the whole philosophy and committed to it. So I just wanted to bring that out. And then I'm going to go to Ben and then David Corton. So Ben.
Well, I want to thank you, David, for an astonishing presentation. It sounds like amazing work that you're doing up there in Humboldt. And I think it could serve as a template for a major piece of how to reconstruct the American economy by assimilating a lot of these rural tribal regions into the larger economy. And I wanted you to comment on one of the ideas that is kind of getting floated in my left YouTube webcast area. Left Reckoning has talked extensively about the idea of basically that the most effective form of reparations we could do for the Native people in this country is to place the national park system under the management and operation and ownership of the regional tribes, whoever has a claim. That way, they're making the money, they get to determine the use patterns, and it provides a steady stream of income, which makes the whole tribe much more vital. Jacobin has endorsed this idea. I think Bernie Sanders has talked about that, in fact. So I think this is would be one step in the right direction, and something that I see as eminently doable under a progressive presidency. It has a snowball's chance in hell right now, but I think it's important to start floating the idea. So that's my take on it.
Well, thank you for that, Ben. I'm going to do a quick reaction. Number one, I love the idea. And it does remind me of when I was in my youth in the 80s, the reparations movement. And, John Conyers, like I was a college student, I'd become aware of apartheid. I began like learning reality. And, John Conyers, the whole reparations movement at the time was, the call was merely to like get your congressperson to endorse John Conyers' bill to study reparations. Living in a very conservative area of Texas, where I had a like Neanderthal of a right-wing representative, it always felt very disempowering. And so I did it. And I do think it's important, as you just did, Ben, to lay out the vision. And what Dishkama does is to say, we don't have to wait for government. We can start doing it ourselves. We could start, like wherever you are, you could start paying an honor tax right now. It would simply take you to understand whose land are you actually on, and doing that research. So what I would say, again, Ben, yes, and I absolutely endorse what you just described. I think it's a brilliant idea. There's a whole host of reasons that I can't go into. You already know them, but absolutely yes to that. And we don't have to wait until we control any aspect of government to begin land back. We can do it right now. And I'll say, for example, I'm helping to facilitate legal land back transfers right now, including, and I say with humility, but the box that I live in right now, I have put into my will that when I transition, the Wiyot tribe will have this house. And we're trying to encourage other people to do so as well.
Right. So David Corton, you're next.
Yeah, David, your presentation just leaves me breathless. Unimaginable, and but I know you don't. You're a truth teller. Anyhow, the thing that kept coming to my mind as you were talking is, wow, how fortunate we are that David did not win the presidency. Because if he did, you'd be in a position like Biden is in, and you wouldn't be able to get anything done. And what you've done is create just an extraordinary example of possibility. And the way you integrate the pieces, which is so essential to the civilizational shift we have to navigate, is absolutely breathtaking. How do you think about this? What do you think this was, God's gift that you didn't win that election?
Well, David, first, thank you. I mean, I rarely have I ever had such a compliment that started from congratulations on your defeat. And I will tell you this with sincerity. And you may not remember this, David, but back in right after 2004, I actually approached you because I was imagining like should I actually go and get a PhD and try to learn more about this? And you said that's exactly what you said. You said, no, David, that would be a waste of your talent and resources. You'll just get frustrated. And you said to me, look, you are an actual concrete field organizer. You're in the field doing the experiments that we need. You encouraged me, don't do that. You need to keep doing the work that you're doing. Then it was Democracy Unlimited, and then it went on to be Move to Amend, and now it's this next thing. And so I say with sincerity, thank you. And I'm going to answer this question. David, I don't know if this was the goddess inspired, but I can tell you this with certainty. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel it with every fiber in my being. This is the right thing to do because I am learning and decolonizing, and in decolonizing my own heart and my own mind, I am actually claiming my humanity that this damned empire stole from me. And white supremacy actually damages me even as it privileges me, because it stole from me the proper relationship as a human that I'm supposed to have. Just like patriarchy damages me even as it privileges me. This whole system is corrupt and it's damaging to me even as it privileges me. And this opportunity to heal myself, to come into the full expression of being a human, that's my birthright. I'm supposed to get to feel like this. And it was stolen from me by a heteropatriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist dominator system in society. And it's not my fault, but as my brother, who is a single parent to 4 daughters, to his girls when they were growing up, they're parents themselves now, some things may not be your fault, but they are your problem. And so I actually just acknowledge, although capitalism is not my fault, it is my problem.
Indeed. Well, David Corton, you did a wonderful mentoring with David Cobb by that advice to him, because if he had gone the other direction, none of this would be happening. I'm pretty sure of that.
I just want to jump in quickly and reemphasize one of his points, that it's the thing that I encountered in my visits to South Africa. The recognition that this system dehumanizes the oppressor as well as the oppressed.
Mhm.
It is a really important recognition.
Acknowledgement. Yes. I think, Fran, you wanted to talk next, and then Lori. So Fran, where did you go?
So, yeah, David, very energetic. You certainly convey your passions very well. So you mentioned that this article that you referred to is coming out, but I want to point out it's already out.
Oh,
So this is the social justice issue of Yes.
I just got it.
Yeah, okay. So then it has, I was just, yeah. So it's got this full spread on this island. Okay,
Mm,
beautiful.
yeah.
yeah.
So the story is the healing work of returning stolen lands. The Wiyot tribe regained its sacred island home after decades of unrelenting prayer and relationship building. And then the full quote in the story is, it was the first time a city government had ever given land back to its ancestral caretakers in the United States. And it was a profound testament to the power of the organizing strength and vision of the Wiyot people. So
Wonderful.
anyway, I'm delighted to know that the Yes people found you. Did you submit this, or how did they?
I'll confess, Sonali, who you may
Yes.
know, is your
Yes,
new racial justice editor, and she's a
Totally.
friend of mine. And so I pitched Sonali, and Sonali loved the story. And she said, David, you've got to find me an indigenous writer for this story. And that's where Penalise came in.
Right,
Penalise
right.
is with the NDN Collective. Get it? NDN, Native Development Network Collective. So Penalise is the author. And I want to say, Fran, that so I obviously know that story. I've told that story. I wrote an article about it with Michelle in Nonprofit Quarterly. And I told Penalise, and this is true, when I read Penalise's version of it that appears there, I literally wept because she captured so much more of the pathos and the poetry and it was such grace and dignity that I tried to do, but I told a linear story, and Penalise, I used prose and Penalise used poetry.
Wow.
I will read it as soon as I get off this call because I just got the magazine. Lori's next.
Thank you, David, for that background. And of course, Sonali is just a treasure that Yes only recently brought into the Yes community, and we are so pleased. We of course known her for decades, right? On her KPFK programs, etc. So anyway, indeed, that she would indeed recognize the value of what you described. Thank you.
But we
Right.
need this larger story that you've told about. That's only one piece of the whole systemic transformation you're achieving in your community, and putting those pieces together is the thing that makes your story so distinctive.
Well, David, let's make sure to follow up because I know you have a well-earned place and of a lot of respect, and I would love for you to help me be a better storyteller and to get it in front of more eyeballs.
Well, we sure need it in Sonoma County, and I do want to talk to you about that this week. Because we have an opportunity to do something incredible, and yet it's being squandered. So, that's a whole other, because we have, I don't know how many acres it is. Ben, you probably know how many acres the Sonoma Developmental Center is. Do you know?
I think it's about 750 acres.
Yeah, it's a big place. I want to go to Lori next, and I'll come back to you, Ben.
Okay.
Lori?
David, I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure, I think it was at least 2 years ago, attending one of your workshops that you had put online. We had been introduced with Georgia and whatever, and I signed up to take one of them because of interest in our local community. Could we incentivize the movement here? Then the pandemic hit, and I will tell you that it's been very difficult to move forward. However, I do feel that there is opportunity still within a nonprofit that I'm associated with for the ability, at least around food and food security. So I'm very interested in your module there because I think that there's a great possibility of seeing expansion. And I also did receive your message today for Giving Tuesday. So I wanted to say it was well received. All right. And give you a plug in that area. So, I mean,
Taxes too. We sent ours out today too.
yes, I saw that as well. And I just wanted to say how impressive this is as a presentation, even larger, bolder, and more distinctive. And I really got it when you were talking about not being competitive, because I think that's one thing that's very difficult. Is a lot of our work here is done in nonprofits, and it is competitive. It's
Very.
competitive for financing and for mission.
Yeah, the competitiveness is really hard with especially in a small community like ours.
And so, Lori,
Yeah.
thank you for the incredible compliment. And I do want to just take a moment to honor, like, I get it, right? As an executive director with a payroll, like, and getting resources, like it is like this system is incentivizing us to compete with one another, right? And it may be unintentional, but it's actually our responsibility to transcend that. Like that is a result of a scarcity myth. Right. And our society commodifies things and tells us that there's not enough. But like, I want you to imagine for a moment, like, what if we act like the biggest gift that Taj James, who helped me, like, was one of the visionaries around integrated capital and creating, both philanthropy and investment opportunities and governmental grants and putting them all together to do these big picture things. He challenged me to say, David, what would you, like, I know you as a skilled community organizer, and I see you in your community doing this local work. What would you do if there was enough money? And he said, no, really, what would you do if there was enough money? And then whenever I started to talk about like all of this stuff, he said, well, then let's just figure out how to get you the money. Like, like, how about that? And it reminded me, Lori, and I want to tell this, if you'll indulge me, a really quick story. One of the best lessons that my mama ever taught me, I'm maybe 4 years old, and I'm arguing with my brother and my cousin Joe Michael. That's right, because I'm from the South and many of us have two names. But we're fighting over a little Matchbox toy. I'm pretty sure it was one of those cars. I don't know what it was for sure, but I know that we were fighting, fussing, yelling. Mama comes into the room, and remember, I come out of poverty, not just working class, but I grew up in true rural poverty. But Mama comes in, and I remember I've got this vision. Maybe I'm just because I've told the story, maybe it's actually one of my earliest childhood memories, but she comes in, but she doesn't stay over us. She literally crouches down and puts her hands on all of us, and in a soothing way, she says, hey, what's going on? No, what's going on? This is terrible. What is it? Oh, I see the problem. Like, because we explained to her, she said, I see the problem. There's 3 of you, but there's only 1 of these. What a problem. Oh, but wait, she said, look. And she literally just started grabbing things and pulling them into the circle. I've seen you play with this. I've seen you play with this. Look at how much you have. There's enough. Oh, and if you all just have to have this one thing, well, then you just have to share it. Because my mama told me there's enough to go around if you just share. And damn it all, it made sense to me as a 4-year-old boy. It makes sense to me as a 59-year-old man. There's enough to go around if we just share.
Indeed. So I'm going to go to Katie because I think we're gonna probably end soon. This has been so exciting, really. But Katie hasn't had a chance to speak yet. So Katie.
Glad to be here. And I'm jumping off in a minute for a client, but David, what I'm experiencing in my community is a lot of the baby boomers are feeling overwhelmed and somewhat powerless, and because there is so much horror going on. And if you had to summarize in 2 sentences how you would motivate these people to get active and to feel hopeful, how would you do that?
Honestly, what I would say is to find the folks who share your vision and learn to pray with your hands.
All
Okay.
right.
I'm going to take one last one. Ben, did you still want to ask something if you can be quick?
Well, yeah, I know of David Cobb primarily until this great presentation and a few other things that Praxis has done over the years as the guy who ran as the Green Party presidential candidate. And when I went through Sonoma State Masters in Public Administration, I had one of my stats professors there uh, did a mathematical proof that the electoral college system predetermines a two-party system, that there will always be a reversion to that mean because of the structure. So I have always been skeptical of the role of third parties, even though I'm personally a socialist, not a Democrat or a Republican. But so what is your feeling about running a Green Party candidate in 2024?
Look, I got to say, I am very, very limited engagement in electoral politics these days. And so, although I believe in it, I vote, I would encourage other folks to do it. But my focus is just not electoral politics. So I just really want to say that up front. And I'm going to I am, I would say this. What I know is if I look at US history and look at systemic transformational change, there is a very easy recipe for how that's done. It's hard to do, but it's easy to describe. It's two parts. One, you need a mass movement that is broad, deep, politically conscious, right? You need a mass movement, and you need an electoral arm of that movement that will advocate for that transformational change. And through US history, I'll argue that most, not all, but most of the ideas of transformation came out of so-called third parties. I'm going to give you a list of what it took third parties to originally advocate for in this country. Again, not that they implemented them, right? But that they advocated for them. Here's that list: the abolition of slavery, women getting the right to vote, the creation of the Social Security Administration, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation laws, pure food and drug laws, ending child labor, the direct election of the United States Senate. I would submit to you that the entire fabric of what most of us today would consider the bare minimum for a just and compassionate society was woven together by visionaries who were advocating for transformational change, and they did that work when they were called naive and unrealistic. They did that work when they were called dangerous un-Americans, and they did that work when they were called spoilers by people of the two-party system. So I think that there is a profound and important role that third parties have always played. I will remind you, of course, that there was a third party president that got elected, and that was Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln was, in fact, a third party candidate. Why? Because the Whigs of that era and the Democrats of that era were both in agreement about slavery, and it created an opportunity for the Republican Party, which began as an abolitionist party. Again, knowing history helps. And I would argue today, and I mean this sincerely, Ben, that today, look, I just don't fuss with people. If folks want to be in the Democratic Party, be in the Democratic Party. If you want to be in the Democratic Socialists of America, if you want to be in the Green Party, if you want to be an independent, I just don't fuss about it. Like, I'm personally a registered Green, but I do know this: we have to tell a new story. And we have to give people examples of that story in actual practice, because as a lawyer and as somebody who's engaged in electoral politics, I don't believe that movements start in either law or electoral politics. law and electoral politics follow culture. We have to do the culture shifting work. We have to meet people's material needs to show them what this new society would actually look like. And we inspire them. And frankly, we show them not only are you going to have a better life, but it's going to be happier. You're going to have better relationships. You're going to have better sex. We're going to listen to better music. We're going to dance better dances. We're going to sing better songs.
Very good. This has been really exciting.
David,
Well,
I've got one comment, just one comment. I would argue that what you're talking about, maybe facetiously not, but the movement that's taking place over 200 years for the US for the growth of corporations. And that's a movement.
Yes.
And it was done actually in two ways, by litigation and by legislation. If you look at the history, that's been very true. I think Ted Nace's book is excellent in that.
No, Gangs of America. It's an
Yeah.
excellent book. And what I would say is, if you take, and I want to give a hat tip to the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I know, Jonathan, you will remember that corporate personhood timeline. And remember that when you look at that timeline for constitutional rights, what you see is every time that corporations gained more rights under law, it became from unelected and unaccountable judges just installing them. And that every time human rights advanced, it was because of mass movements. So I am not discounting the importance of litigation or of electoral politics and legislation. I'm saying I think that the way we start is through movements, and we have to codify those mass movements in.
Right. And
Okay.
your work with the Native Americans is so important, because the history of this country can be seen as a determination and a fight over who is and who is not a person. The corporations were people or persons before, at least 3 decades before women got the right to vote.
No, everything that you say is true, Jonathan, of course.
So I want to thank you, David, so much for today and for the depth that you went into. Those of you who came in late didn't hear about the original part that we did record about the elections in 2000 and 2004, which David was quite heavily involved in. So we have all this recorded. I will send all of you the recording. And I want to thank you again. And I think everybody wants to express their appreciation who's still on the call. So we for you. Thank you, David. I'm going to talk to you soon, because I want to talk to you about this problem in Sonoma County. And I'll probably talk to a few others in Sonoma before I talk to you about it.
Well, it's always a delight to speak with you. And I do want to just thank not only Georgia Kelly individually, but I want to thank the Praxis Peace Institute for this opportunity and for the amazing series of teach-ins that you've been offering ever since COVID. And I look forward to dropping in on a couple of others.
Well, I hope you can come tomorrow and Friday. We have some great ones tomorrow and Friday. You'll get the link. Well, it's the same link you used today.
Thank you
So
so
I'm going to
much.
stop recording.